opportunity that we have to gather with you, to meet with you, to commune with you, and just to be called your children and your servants. Just think about this weekend that we in our country call Memorial Day, remembering those who fought, lived, died, willing to put their lives on the line for others that they don't even know, but yet because they have the same land that we call our home. And yet you go even beyond that, and you came down and to die for your people that you called out of idol worshipers through Abram. And you came down and you died for a people that came out of that who were constantly rebellious, constantly indignant, constantly disobedient to you. And then you also included us. It is truly a Memorial Day of also remembrance of you, the one who gave everything for those that deserve nothing. The life that you give to us, to continue understanding, not just in the initial life of giving life to our spirit, but then ongoingly giving us the life through the Spirit of Christ. Your outward flow of that faith to give us to see what you say in your word, to bless us, not just to know you, but to understand more about who you are in your word, and to be prepared more so as we see these days coming closer to the time which you call us home. Thank you for being each and every one of us and helping us in our family situations. Thank you for watching over all the parents and patriarch systems that you have put in place to bring us into this world. They're trying, they're emotional, they're blessings, there's love, there's hurts, there's confusion at times about why you do things that you do, and being honest about ourselves, knowing that we don't understand it all. I'm sure Noah had the similar thought, thinking of Methuselah, his grandfather, and Lamech, his father, not able to join him on this ark. What a heartbreak that must have been for him, to be able to speak and teach about the things to come, and yet no, they would never join him. That time would come and they'd be gone. So we thank you for always helping us understand in the family dynamics, things that you have laid down before, that people of faith are often separated from the things of family and always called to be of a higher level with you. So we thank you for your gift of grace you give us and strength to get through this life. Empower us now, give us insight from your word. Be our pastor, our teacher, our counselor, our guide, our pastor, our shepherd, everything, our coming bridegroom, everything, Father. Be with us now and help us to see and understand what you want us to take from your word, from understanding more of you, to see more of how we should be understanding of what we need to be better for you as our servant and child walk towards you. Thank you for your love. We ask all this in Jesus, Yeshua's name. Amen. All right, so this is part 3 of Noah's Ark, if you consider each session's 2 parts, even though it's our second session together. So the reality is that there's so much factoids you have to cover in Noah's Ark just to even get to the flood itself and the ark itself. And we spent a lot of time last week on doing that. I'm not sure if that was too bit of a quick clip of how I was going through things. But the reality is there's just so much. The biggest misnomer to review, I think, is a big takeaway, is that the world around you, the modern scientific community, the modern churchianity of people that don't even understand and give a clue toward the truth, they will sensationalize and say that it's, maybe a isolated flood, or they'll say that it was, just in a place of it's just a reference to a story. It's not really legitimately accurate, and you're like, whoa. Or they'll show pictures that everybody always does. They never show a picture of 7x7, do they, of the animals? I haven't seen one yet. If you show one like that, I'd love to see it. I've looked and I cannot find a picture. If you do find one online, please share it with me, or find one in person. Please share it with me. I'd love to see a picture of 7 animals male, 7 animals female going onto an ark. I'd love to see it. Haven't seen it. And yet we do see 2x2 all the time. But yet God mentions that twice to their defense, 2x2, but he mentions 1, 7x7. So in their defense, I see why they would do that. Sandwiched in between the references by the 2x2 is the mentioning of the 7x7 of the clean and 2x2 of the unclean. We'll get to that in just a moment. But I think one of the biggest misnomers about that is not only the number, but also the modern community will say, well, there's millions of species out there. And we talked about how Darwin has polluted the thought process of the brain cells to call different variations of deer, bear, lion, and so forth, and he calls them species. No, dude, they're variations of one species. So when you look at scientific community and they go, there's millions, no, stop lying. They're calling a species a variation of one kind. So again, all bears come from one bear. All lions come from one lion. Don't be insane. If you think that's far-fetched to understand, I keep going back to this. It's not hard, by the way. I don't care who you're talking to. I don't care if it's a PhD in evolution and a PhD in science and biology and all this, Simply ask them this question. If they go, you are a moron, you're closed-minded, you Christian people are so dumb. If they say that to you, just go, let me get this straight. So you're saying that different variations of lion all count as a different species, right? And they'll say, yeah. So, okay. So, because they live in different parts of the world, right? Yeah, there's a safari lion, there's a mountain lion, there's just, okay. So that means that we have 7 continents, so there's 7 species of humans, right? And they'll go, what? Well, that's what you're saying. Because we all look different, act different, and live different. Are we not species according to your definition of a species? Well, you're being really weird now, man. Exactly. I'm showing you the ignorance of that interpretation. That is not the proper interpretation, so stop the lies. A species, Homo sapien, may be manifest in many different variations of how we look. I don't care if you're African, South American, North American. I don't care what you is, okay? You are a Homo sapien. If you have what we have our definition of a human being, you're a Homo sapien. One species, variations, right? So just use that as your proof text to show the folks, come on, man. There's not 10,000 species of a deer or 600 species of a bear. You're being boneheaded. You're making this stuff up just to make fun of God and His Word. And He doesn't appreciate it. And watch when you stand before Him, and especially those in Christ who do this are idiots. No offense, I'm going to say that clearly. You clearly are an idiot if you do that. Because if you're in Christ, you know better. That is wrong, wrong, wrong. Stop doing it. You're misleading those who want to understand the Scripture. So with that being said, that's one of the biggest misnomers is 1, the groups of animals, and 2, the word species, how it's used, right? So that's kind of the confusion. So we talked about how in the ark, how the dimensions were. I mentioned 30,000 animals and 2,000 species. Now, I'm not counting the birds when I say 30,000 animals, because there was about probably 1,000 species of birds, which if you do that, and by the way, if you do math on this, I'm using like a 90-10 ratio of like, I'm being generous to say there's 90,000 of the 30,000 animals, of the 2,000 species, excuse me, 90% of them would be clean and 10% would be unclean. That would be 1,800 species would be clean, right? And then you have 200 to be unclean, just using rough math. And I'm rounding up on purpose, just to kind of go through the math. And you say, okay, if the 1,800 are clean and 200 are unclean, that means you got 7 by 7, right, of 1,800 species, which is 14. So if I do 14, just watch the math on this. So if I'm just doing, and Nancy, you're the math person, right? So here we go. So if I'm just going to show you. So if I'm doing 14, because there's 7 males, 7 females of the clean species, and if there's 2,000 and there's 1,800 of them, how do I get 1,800? That's 90% of 2,000, right? So if I do 14 times 1,800, that's 25,200, right? Is that right? Am I doing that right? 1,800 species. Is that right? Am I doing that right? Am I doing that wrong? I think I'm doing that wrong. Am I doing that wrong or right? What am I doing? I did this math before and I'm messing this up now. So here I am. What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? Come on, come on, come on. I don't even know now what I'm doing. See this? I'm messing myself up here. So if I do 2,000 species, so if 1,800 of them are clean, did I do that right the first time? Yeah. So 17, what did I get? Oh, I know. Gotcha. Here it is. 17, what did I get? What the heck is my? Okay, wait a minute here. Why is my times 14? 25,200. Yeah, is that right? Yeah, 1,800 times 14. Come on, don't stop my fat fingers. Times 14. Yeah, 25. I thought I was right. My calculator, I had something else in there. 25,200. Well, I'm saying there's 30,000. So if I take the other 10, which is 200, and I take those times 4, well, that's 800. Well, now I'm at 25,000 plus 200 plus 8, that's 26,000. Then I'm leaving some more room for some birds and whatnot, right? And some other little creepy things, remember? That's interesting, it says creepy things, remember? So I'm just rounding up on purpose. And the birds, there's about 1,000 of them, and if you count the same mathematics on that, you're looking at about another 11,000 maybe, and the birds. So you have about maybe 40,000 animals on the ark if you count birds. But that's the other 10,000. So there's like, but of the land creatures, the big boys, there's 30,000 of them. And if you start doing math on this type of situation, you'll find that the core dinosaurs could be on the ark. If you're wondering what's the average size of a baby, huge animal, you'll look up the biggest animals we know about. There's about 24 oversized land creatures. Of the 24, 20 are dinosaurs, okay? Which they're the big boys. I mean, the Titanosaurus, the T-Rex, the Stegosaurus, all those kind of big boys, there's like 20 of them, right? But on the other side of our normal animals we see today, elephant, hippopotamus, those are the big bears. So it's hippopotamus, elephant, hippopotamus, bear, and there's another one, rhino. Those are the 4 biggest animals we have on our planet right now. So elephant, rhino, elephant, in order it's actually elephant, hippo, rhino, bear, and the size from birth as a little baby. So I took the biggest one, which is the elephant, right? And the elephant at birth is about 300 pounds on a high end. It goes between 200 and 300, so to be fair, I used 300 pounds. And they are a height about 3 feet off the ground. So what? It's about like what here? 3 feet off the ground, and they're 300 pounds. That's 100 pounds per foot. That's a lot of weight, all right? So you say, okay, what are you getting at? I want to make sure that people understand the plausibility that an ark is real. And it's not just a fictitious story made up from fairy tale Mother Goose Land. It's real, okay? So when God put the animals on the ark and he's doing this, in the scripture, we see it says it's 45, we did the conversion from cubits to feet, 45, all I did is a calculator, you can go online for cubic feet, 45 feet high, 75 feet wide, and 450 feet long equals 1,638,484 cubic feet. You go, what's that mean? Oh, I don't know. That means it only holds 20,550 tons. You go, so? Well, what that means is, how do I get that? How do I know that? Well, it's funny that you said that. Thanks for asking. Because I looked up shipping containers to get scale, right? In order to get scale, like in any math thing, you have to get some kind of legend key on a map to read a map. You have to have some kind of reference to figure out the X, the Y, right? So I said, well, a 40-foot shipping container holds about 30 tons. And its dimensions are, I'll give you dimensions, it's actually 2,391 cubic feet. So I divide 2,391 cubic feet, which is the cubic feet of a 40-foot container, those shipping containers you put on a freight barge, those big steel boxes, right? So 2,391 cubic feet for a shipping container, 40 foot long, non-refrigerated. You don't need that. We're not doing food. We're doing animals. So let's just say, okay, so therefore that divided into this number equals 685 containers that can fit on the ark. That's a lot, okay? Just so you know, if you're thinking, oh, come on, man, Preston, you're ridiculous. It can't hold 20,550 tons. Did you know the average freight liner today holds 25,000 tons? So before you start thinking, oh, man, you're proving yourself to be a moron, just a second here. The average freight liner today holds 25,000 tons. So before you think it's not plausible, just stop for a second and take that in, okay? Talking about God here, not mankind, right? So mankind devised a way on their own without God instructing them what to do, because God just gave us a brain to think and build on previous history. We had developed buoyancies of boats that can hold 25,000 tons. So why can't God tell Noah how to hold just under 21,000? I don't see a problem with that. The key and the catch is, second here, the flood happened around, it was 344 BC, but wait a minute, let's see, look at here. The Copper Age didn't start until 3000 BC, which means Noah was in the Stone Age. Did Noah have nails on the ark? No. You go, huh? How'd the boards hold together then? I know, right? Because in all the movies and in all the little cartoons, they show Noah with a hammer, and he's going, no, dude. He used dowels and tongue and groove. You're going, amazing. So guess what? If the ark was pitched on the inside and on the out, that's what it says. The ark was pitched on the inside and on the out. Let me read this to you. I want you to go over to Genesis And I want you to read this in chapter 6 in verse 14. It says, make thee an ark of gopher wood, rooms that thou shalt make in the ark, and thou shalt pitch it within and without with pitch. And on the board, I think I put it somewhere on here. Here it is right here. As pitch from within, it means to make appropriation, to kafar. But to pitch from without means to pay a ransom, which is kufar. One is K-A-P-H-A-R, was the first pitching on the within. But the without is the kofar, which is a pay a ransom. So hello, Christ was our propitiation on the outside. He's the one bringing himself. He's the only priest. He's the only high priest. The only high priest. The only high priest who could bring a sacrifice for our sin. And he's the only sacrifice for our sin that was sufficient. He was the outside appropriation. Oh, yowza. From within, he was blameless. He was spotless as a lamb. And then without, the external, as everybody saw, no one saw him being a high priest, but they did see a sacrifice, didn't they? They didn't see that high priest ministry he was performing, because it was veiled in the fact he was both the sacrificer and the sacrifice. No one actually saw that at the time. At best, all they saw was the sacrifice, the Lamb of God. But wait a second. If Christ is a type of the ark, the ark was a type of a point of that which was embodied with animals and humans, and it was used for 370 days to deliver ones from a time of judgment to a time of restoration, got them through safely. So it's a salvation, right? And it's not coincidentally, it was kafared. It was pitched from within and pitched from without. But wait a minute, what held the ark together again? Nails? No. No. Dowels and tongue and groove wood that God said for Noah to build over a 100-year period with gopher wood. So I say this to you. I think it brings up chills to think that the nails did not hold Yeshua, Jesus, to the cross. He held himself there. Now that is crazy. As in, when they put the nails in his hands, on his wrists and his feet, he was holding himself up there in a supernatural, powerful way because he wanted to die for you and for me. Now that is insane. The nails were just superfluous for the purpose of paying our sin debt. It had nothing to do with why he was on that cross. He was holding himself on that cross of his own will, of his own intent, of his own strength, of his own power. In other words, without the nails, he'd have still stayed there. You're like, but dude, that makes no sense. That's physics. He walks on water. He floats in the air. What's hard to believe about that? I mean, come on, okay? He can walk through a room without the doors closed, you know. He can easily hold himself on a cross. That to me is huge. Why the ark had no nails, none. It had dowels and tongue and groove to represent that Christ was held together on that cross, not by nails, by his power, by his strength, by his atoning within and his atoning without. That's what held him there. The pitch is what held that ark together. It's the same atonement that Christ, as the high priest and as our sacrifice, that's what held him there. That is amazing. Okay? That is like wild stuff. Yes? Okay, don't miss the point about that. Was there nails? Yes. But they weren't there to hold him. They were there to represent the sacrifice for our sin, to depict the whole image of the Paschal Lamb being sacrificed. And so when he told Thomas to do that, that's because Thomas, don't forget, was not a doubting Thomas. He was the same as everybody else. The women who saw him resurrect, they saw his body gone, angels talked to them, and they still go, where's the body? Show us where you put it. You just, oh my gosh, you just saw an empty tomb. What makes you think that he's been stolen? I just told you, I mean, he's gone. He's not here. He's alive. I told you, why do you look for the dead among the living? And what did they say? Oh, where's he at? Where's he at? Where'd you take him? Where'd you lay the body? What are you talking about? Even the apostles, they believe when John and Peter got there. Remember, they stoop in. Oh my God, he's alive! And they come back and they go, yeah, you know. What do you mean, you know? They still wanted to see his physical body. The women did, and the apostles did. So Thomas is saying, why am I any different? I want to see too. I'm just like you guys. I'm a human too. I believe. No, I don't disbelieve. I believe, but I want to believe even like ardently and like convincingly by seeing him and touching him and like you guys got to do. It's not fair. I didn't see it. Okay, I believe, but I want to be firmly believing in this so I can actually be like you guys and don't make fun of me. And like you guys were all in before you saw him. Stop lying. No, you weren't. None of you were like that. All of you saw the tomb empty, and you had to still say, well, where did his body at? Until he came to you and you saw him, then your joy was complete, then your joy was fulfilled, then you knew for real. I want the same thing. What's wrong with that? But everybody makes fun of Thomas. He's like, really? I mean, stop making fun of me, brother. I mean, it's the thing. He was just the guy who was the odd man out. Why? Because he was the guy that represents in typology the rest of us. Who Jesus said, blessed are those who believe and don't see. That's why the Lord wanted him to be in that position, to represent the rest of us who constantly in Christianity, who are constantly today saying, I wish God would show me this. I wish God would show me that. I wish God would do this. And if God could speak to you verbally from the audience of a cloud, he would say, stop it. You do see in my word. You do believe. You do have certainty. You have the completed story. Wake up. Be a child of faith. Yes?
Lainey said, yes, I get the point you're making for sure.
Yep. So that's the point that Thomas was just, and by the way, he's the only one, to his credit, he's the only one who said, my Lord and my God. No one else said that. He declares him as God. Boom. I mean, Mary says, Rabboni, teacher, master, but she didn't say God. Thomas is the only one that was recorded to say, my Lord and my God. I mean, if you're going to make fun of the guy, give him credit where credit's due also. 8 days later, he was the one who declaredly said, he is divine. And he knelt, let's get real. He was worshiping the divine. He's the only one who was, and that's why, by the way, Greek Orthodox people who think they're the only way that believes Christianity should be carried out are the ones that celebrate Easter 8 days later, because that's when Thomas saw the resurrected Lord, and they believe Thomas, who built congregations in India, they believe that he's the one who's the first earmark of how a governing body of believers should run, because after all, he's the one who first worshiped the divine. That's what they take that from. So it's the opposite is true about him. People just, if you don't see history through what tradition says, you see it through just what happened, you see that, oh my goodness, Thomas actually is not as bad as you think he is. I mean, he's just a normal human being who wanted the same thing everybody else did. It's just that you kind of blur the lines between him fulfilling the same thing they were doing, which is they wanted to see. He was just isolated from the group as wanting to see. They were in a group wanting to see, so you don't remember that. They were part of a group of women first and a group of men second who all wanted to see. He was just isolated on his own, so we all remember his doubt. They doubted too.
And with the 8th day, there was a connection to circumcision.
Right. So he's a week after the whole process before he sees. So it's just, it's an 8 day. It was a consummate 8 days of the circumcision, meaning he was the one who was circumcised in heart. I would say, because he's the only one who took a knee and called him my Lord and my God. I mean, he was worshiping him. But no one else was doing that. I don't know. There's nothing else about this. Again, the only one that came close is Mary. When she grabbed hold of him and his mother, they came close to worshiping him in the sense of kneeling down and grabbing hold of him. Kurt, I'll give him that. But they didn't say, my Lord, my God.
Maybe the 8th day was the first day it was possible to say that.
Well, who knows? So, but I just think that Thomas is a little bit more. He's a better person people put him out to be. So the whole thing about the ark being in this, that's back to where I was going from, is what held Christ on the cross was his will. His will, as he consistently, he was the appropriation, the high priest, and he was the paying ransom as the sacrifice itself. He was both. Interesting enough, you think it's just coincidence the word kafar is not the same word? It's kafar and then kofar. One means appropriation and one means pay a ransom. That's not coincidence. It's not coincidence, brothers and sisters. It's also not coincidence that the ark was built prior to the copper and bronze and iron age. You can't have iron and bronze and copper in a stone age of the BC era that Noah built the ark. You can't have that. Hello, I'm just saying, right? So it's just interesting how you see this like a whole dynamic that changes everything, and how you go, wow, man. So wait a second. Why was it that when they got on the ark, so before he gets on the ark, God says, he says in verse 19 of Genesis chapter 6, So Genesis 6 in chapter 19, he said, chapter 6, verse 19, excuse me. He says, of every living thing, of all flesh, sorry, I'm picking a page out of my Bible because it fell apart. I want to, in advance, let you know that's what I'm reading. I'm not reading a magazine. I'm reading the scripture. It's just the pages fell out, and it's easier to hold it like this. I want to let you know that. All right, so of every living thing, of all flesh, two of every sort, shalt thou bring into the ark to keep them alive, and they shall be male and female. Of fowls after their kind, and of cattle after their kind, of every creepy thing of the earth after its kind, two of every sort come unto you to keep them alive. Now, did you see the mention of 7 and 7 in there? Nope. And to people's defense, who would say, oh, come on, it's always 2 by 2. Let's go over to chapter 7, read verse 14 and 15. You'll see it again. They and every beast after its kind, and all the cattle after their kind. This is chapter 7, verse 14. And after their kind, upon every creeping thing, and creepeth upon the earth after its kind, and every fowl after its kind, every bird of every sort. And they went into the ark, 2 and 2 of all flesh, wherein is the breath of life. So interesting. So again, he mentioned it twice, right? But look at chapter 7, verse 2. In verse 2 he says, of every clean beast thou shalt take thee 7 by 7. It actually says 7s in the King James, but it should be interpreted 7 by 7. And the male and his female. And of the beast they are not clean, or not pure, 2 by 2. The male and female. Of the flyers also of the air, by 7s of 7, the male and female, to keep seed alive upon the face of the earth. To keep seed alive. Meaning, when Noah got off the ark and killed an animal, he would have ended a species, for crying out loud. He's not going to do that. He's going to clean animals on the ark to sacrifice afterwards. Yes?
Todd said, is that 2 males and 2 females
Yes.
of every kind?
Yes. So what he's basically saying is, the reason people would say, here's the question. Why is it that God says Genesis 6, that is 2 by 2, but also Genesis 7 later on is 2 by 2, but in between sandwiched is this 7 by 7 stuff? What's that all about? So what's true? Is God contradicting himself? No. He's just saying the minimum is 2 males and 2 females, right? That's all he's saying. That's the minimum, dude. Is that not true? Is it not true? If you have 2 males and 2 females of unclean, is it not true then that if I have 7 males and 7 females, that the minimum of all creatures is, guess what? 2 by 2. Thank you. Right? Simple math, right? That's all God's saying. That's all he's saying. He's just saying he wants you to know there's at least 2 males and 2 females of every kind. That's the emphasis of 2 by 2. Not to say they were all 2 by 2, just that was the minimum of all the animals. So you say, who's the unclean birds? Well, the scavenger birds, like the ravens and the vultures. They're scavenger birds. We're going to get to that later and ask yourself the question, if Noah had all kinds of birds on the ark, which he did, that means the ostrich too can't fly. He counts as a land creature because he can't fly, right? So interesting enough how if I'm on an ark for a year and 10 days, or just over a year, if I'm going to send a bird out to look for dry land, let me see. I have all birds to choose from. I'm going to go with a raven, not a hawk, who can see like nobody's business, not an eagle. Those dudes have the best eyesight of all birds. Why wouldn't I send one of those out? We'll get to that later, but think about that. He had an eagle on the boat, and he had a hawk on the boat. Didn't send him out. Why? God said, do a raven. A scavenger bird. It's really interesting, isn't it? And then later on, a dove. Like, what? No mention of a hawk, no mention of an eagle, and they're on the ark, and they got tremendous eyesight. Right? Tremendous eyesight. Better than any other bird. Yes?
Tracy said ravens are very, very smart.
Well, they're not too bad, but their eyesight isn't the same as a hawk or an eagle, I'll tell you that. They're not anywhere near. Vultures are very smart too, by the way, to your point. Vulture, they say, is the most intelligent of all birds, is the vulture. But boy, he's a scavenger to nobody's business. Yes?
You're saying the 370 days. I'm not seeing just where you're getting the 370 days.
I'll go there. I'll show you. I'll show you in a minute. I'll get there. So if you didn't hear the question, Nancy, was, how did I get to 370 days? But I'll do this right now on the board for you. It's actually right here. So the flood waters were for 40 days and 40 nights. Started on Youre, Second month, 17th, April, May, which is in Genesis chapter 7, verse 4 and 11. Then he said, 150 days, then the waters settled down, Genesis 8:1. So that means at 40 days, the ark was buoyant on the waters. So it was cumulative 150 days in Genesis 8:1. So you got 40 minus the 150, 110 days later was 150 total days. The waters began to decrease. And so you start adding this, Genesis 8:5. 73 days later is the 10th month of Tebeth. It's off to the mountains were seen. Then 90 days later is the first of Nisan. Then the water dried off the land. Then 57 days later, the second month of Youre, which is the same month that it started, on the 27th day, which is 10 days more. That's 360 days in a year, plus 10, there's 370. The earth was dry, and they were on the ark for that many days. You with me? There's the math is right there. So I simply just did the math of the different months and gave you the scriptures for it and just added it up. I know I went kind of fast on that, but it's all referenced in Scripture. And if you do the math on it, it's a year and 10 days. If you're using 360 days as God's calendar. I'm not using...
It would have been in Noah's day. That was before all
Correct.
Moses, their day
Yeah.
was still in Hezekiah's son died.
Yeah, I'm not using God's calendar. And whenever there's days and months and years involved, I default always, all the time, without reservation, to God's calendar of 360 days. People always say, well, that's moronic. Where do you get that from? Well, I get that from Revelation and Tribulation period, a known period of time where God counts 1,260 days as a midpoint of a 7-year period. Well, doing simple math, that's how you know that God definitively counts a year as 360 days. It's that simple. It's not hard to figure out.
Roughly 1500 BC in Joshua's day before that got ruined.
Yeah, it was, yeah. There was a lot of, because Joshua's day when he held this, yeah. So there's a lot of...
The thing that really bugged it out was Hezekiah's sundial. Joshua's just did a little, but Hezekiah's sundial was the one that did the big deal.
And that's why, and when God changed the whole schematic of how the sun was being held up and he changed things, that's why he says, no man knows the day of the hour. You can do all the math you want. You're not ever going to figure out how the celestial changes he did affected our timeline. There's no way you're going to have an exactness to that. That's why he said, just know the seasons. You can know the roundabouts, you just will never know the reality. And for me, I get chills thinking that Noah was working 100 years up to this ark. And it's funny because every commentary you'll see on Bible commentaries, or not every, but most of them you'll see, and most videos you'll see talking about the ark, they'll go, and Noah got a word from God, and he was 500. And then for 120 years he was preaching. Stop! Wrong. That's not true. That's not true. It's 100 years. You go, how do you know that? Okay. Genesis chapter 5, verse 32. And Noah was a son of 500 years old, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. I didn't write the book. That's what it says. Chapter 7, verse 6. And Noah was a son of 600 years old when the flood of waters was upon the earth. Explain to me, Miss Mathematician, how do you get 120 years out of that? Stop lying. Stop being ignorant. Come on, man. Gosh. Where they get it from is because God says in chapter 6, verse 3, and the Lord said to their defense, my spirit shall not always strive, eternally plead with humanity. For in his hour that he is also in flesh, yet his days shall be 120. So they from that get 120 years between Noah building the ark and the flood coming, because they think his spirit not striving represents the destruction of the earth with a flood. I get where you're coming from, but you're not doing the math, dude. That's fine to think that, but it's okay to think that until you continue to read and you go, oh, it can't be true because 100 and 500 and 600 is 100. So the only thing you're left with is what I've always said is that 20 years afterwards off the ark, Noah then plants a vineyard, and he represents how for 20 years they were doing well until that's when this whole Ham and what he did unto Noah's wife happened. That's how you know when that happened, because it kind of polluted the line again, and that's when God said, that's it, I'm out. And God just, he left. And that's like horrific to think that. And so it's pretty like, ugh. So with that being said too, I'm going to go back to Genesis chapter 6 and remind ourselves of another interesting factoid that people tend to forget, including me. Two things I want to bring up about this age issue a little bit later, but about this issue of what was the earth like? Looking back in chapter 6 and verse 10 through 13. Chapter 6, 10 to 13. First of all, chapter 10, verse 9, chapter 6, verse 9 of Genesis. And these are generations of Noah, who was a just man, a righteous man, a without blemish, perfect man, all his generations. The word man, remember, means a man of stature, a man of renown. It's the first time it's used was of Eve's husband, which is used the word for it's her man, but it's meant to mean a man of stature, not just a anthropos, but a kamosh. He was actually a man of stature. He wasn't describing just a regular man. He was a man of stature. In other words, of renown, of high integrity. You know? So God said he was a man of, again, just man and a blameless man. He was a man of stature. And he walked with God. So Noah begat 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And the earth was corrupted before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth and saw it was corrupted with all flesh, had corrupted his way upon the earth. Remember, all flesh, all flesh, all flesh, violence, corruption, all flesh, violence. Just remember, all flesh, violence, corruption, all flesh, violence, corruption, all flesh, violence, corruption. I didn't write the book. Just remember that. Verse 13, and God said unto Noah, all flesh has come upon before me and filled the earth with violence. And through them I will destroy them. Right? So, violent, corruption, all flesh. So what does that mean? We talked about it before. We're going to go more into this a little bit. Wait. Humans were killing humans. Cain killed Abel. After that, we have his lineage, where Lamech comes in, and he says, not the Lamech Noah's dad, a different Lamech under Cain's line, chapter 4, verse 23, and this Yahoo says, and Lamech said unto his wives Adah and Zillah. Well, I say Jacob was the first polygamist. I meant on the righteous side. This guy was supposed to be a sinner. He's a dork. So this guy Lamech had 2 wives. Hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech. Hearken unto my speech. For I have slain a man for my wounding, and a young man for my hurt. If Cain be avenged 7-fold, truly Lamech 70 and 7-fold. Nothing to be proud of, you idiot. So here's Lamech, this sinful guy, who's killing 2 different people and bragging about having 2 humans he killed. And so he wants his name to be known as, he was the first, I guess you could say, multiple killer, I guess, serial killer, I guess you can say. He was a person who killed more than one, at least Cain only killed one guy in a passion of violence, his own brother. He was angry. It's a moment of crime of passion. He actually, he premeditated it as well. But it was just one person. We don't have any other record of Cain ongoingly killing people. But Lamech killed 2 people. And he's proud of it. This guy's a jerk. And so that particular thing continued to proliferate to the world. You say, how do I know that? Because God said all flesh was violent. All flesh. Wait a minute. That means animals too. Ooh. So what I submit to you, part of the consequence of sin is that animals began to eat animals. They began to pursue each other as predator and prey. That never existed prior to the fall in Eden. The fall in Eden, they were all vegetarian, human and animal. Then all of a sudden, humans started killing humans first, and then animals killed animals second. But what was in between there? God killed an animal. Interesting. God kills animal, right? So God kills animal. Man kills man. Animal kills animal. What? Isn't that? And so God's saying, you see, all the violence started with your sin. Your sin started it. I had to kill an innocent creature to protect you yahoos. God is the one who first acted in violence because he had no choice. Well, he did have a choice, but God chose to love us. Instead of leaving us in our own sinful state, he chose to give us a sign of, in the future, I'm going to cover you with this coat of skin of this lamb to come, which will be me, but for now, it's symbolic. This will appease our ability to still commune with each other, even though it's a strained relationship. The lines of communication will still be open because I have to have an act of violence, of a death has to happen because of your sin, and then just know that that's your fault. Imagine the look on Adam and Eve's face when they went, did that creature die because of us? Yes. Yes. A violent death happened. They saw this lamb, just killed. I don't know if they saw it or they knew the coat of skin came from an animal. They know that. How would you think of how, I was just mentioning the other day, given Nancy's car accident, I had a nephew. And long and short is that I have a nephew that I had a long time ago, over 30 years ago. He actually was with a group of his friends who were not and is suitable to drive. And so they said, won't you drive? He said, I can't. I'm sunstroke. I'm a pale guy. And they, well, he's better than the rest of us. We're all drunk from spring break. So he then drove, and he fell asleep behind the wheel. And he crashed. And his best friend in the front seat is dead. He was charged with involuntary manslaughter. It changed his life forever. Is he a good kid? Absolutely. He was like straight A, valedictorian, Air Force crew cut kind of guy. He's a well-adjusted kid now, no doubt about it. He's well-adjusted. He's at peace. He's a loving guy. He has a family, wife and kids. Everything's great. But the point is, he looks different and acts different and is totally different from that point forward. It changed him forever. Whether it's for the good or bad is not my point. My point is, there was a time of a lull, of dealing with it. Then there was time of rediscovery. But it doesn't matter what point along the line, you're changed forever. You're changed forever. Because you have to live with the fact that your actions, whether knowingly or unknowingly, whether willingly or unwillingly, cause the end of a life of someone else. That changes you forever. Especially when we live in a world back in the Garden of Eden, there was no death. There was no death. There was no death. God said, the day you eat thereof, surely you'll die. They didn't have their death they experienced was more spiritual. They didn't actually see it. They didn't see blood being shed or a coat of skin. They had to realize that's their fault. They were the first domino that fell that created violence on the earth. Ever since then, that God said, now it's filled with violence, and just know that's y'all's fault. That's all on you. That's all on your sin. That's on you. You own that. Yes?
Lainey said it had to be without blemish and a year old.
Yep. Without blemish and a year old, yep. Which means that's how long they were communing together. Gives you an idea. So God kills animal, man kills man, animal kills animal, and then man begins to kill animals as well. Right? So the violence on the earth was not just mankind. It was all flesh, God said. I want to point that out to you. Again, I'm not making this up. God said all flesh, and he makes it clear in chapter 6 and 7 later on that all flesh included the animals. So therefore, wait a second. Think about this for a second. You got about 40,000 animals on this ark, 10,000 being birds, but 30,000 that are more predatorial. And you got some creepy things, by the way. We'll get to that in a second. You got 30,000 animals. You got 8 humans. 8 humans. That's it? 8 humans. 8. 8 humans on an ark. Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their 3 wives. That's how you know there's 8. That's it. 30,000 animals. And you're seeing the fact that that's a lot of animals. And they're meat eaters now. Do you actually think that predator and prey were probably a little bit apprehensive getting on that ark? If I was a gazelle and I saw a lion, I'd be like, oh, I wouldn't want to be next to him. He just killed my kinfolk, you know? And that'd be kind of odd. So we already know by the fact that there was violence, and yet God didn't have any mention at all of animals having a ruckus going on. There was no misbehavior going on. There's no record of a rhino charging the wall of the ark. There's no mention of an elephant going pitching a fit. None of that. So what am I saying? Even though there was violence, God did a miracle in allowing these animals to be at peace. God provided peace and provision to allow the predator-prey mentality to be put at bay. Many would argue that God put some of these animals in hibernation, like a bear. So if that's the case, then therefore you wouldn't need as much food, which leads to this point, because if there is enough room to hold 20,550 tons, that means there was, if I do the math of these animals, and what I'm using is, if I use 24 animals, the elephant, the hippo, the rhino, and the bear as the top 4 heavy ones, 300 pounds, I'm going to use the high end, even though they're not all 300 pounds as babies. I'm going to use that as a reference of the minimum weight. And the other 20 of dinosaurs, I'm using all 24 of those to average out a weight of 300 pounds. Well, if I take those 24 species, I take 14 of them, and I say, hey, I'm going to take 24 species, 4 that we know today, elephant, hippo, rhino, bear, and I take 20 of the largest dinosaurs. I'm at 24 large creatures, or the heaviest creature as a baby. If I take those heaviest creatures and assume a 300-pound weight at baby state, infancy state, that's 4, they're all clean. So that's 24 times 14, that's 336 times 300 pounds. There's 336 of them. If there's 14 sets of 24, then that means there's a 100,800 pounds, right? Okay, so I use that. Then I simply added the other animals are about 60 pounds apiece on average. Then you just multiply that by the ratio of 90% of those are clean, 10% are unclean, and you get a weight of about 40. It's this, the weight of, so if you have 1976 that are left, and I'm doing 90% of those that are going to be clean, I'm going to say that there's going to be 1,779, which means I'm going to have another 1,494,360 pounds. And if I do the other 10% that are unclean, which is 197 times 4 of those sets, that's 788 of those, which I'm going to get 47,280 pounds. I add it all together and I get 1,655,440 pounds, which divided by 2,000 pounds in a ton, that equals 827 tons. There's just a lot of tonnage of animals. There was 827 tons, but you got to times that, times all the animals. So I'm just letting you know there's 18,900 tons. That leaves 1,600 tons of food, which is 3 million pounds, which is 8,648 pounds of daily consumption divided by animals and Noah's family. That's 4 ounces a day for daily living if you count 370 days. But do all the animals eat the same measure of meal? No. Bigger animals need a whole lot more. Birds need little grams of little seed. The humans, we can ration our food too. And what if God did cause them to be hibernating? The argument is that he probably did, because why else would he not do that, given if he can actually take predator and prey and give them at peace and not be roaring at each other, how could he not then just put them to sleep once they're on the ark? Sure he could, right? Which means they had no need for a food substance every day, right? So there's a lot of platitudes in there that we can give to God Almighty to see what he would have done and behind the scenes. But the size and the weight, no problem. Holding the animals and holding the food. Especially when you factor in what God would do with predator and prey and with also hibernating some animals. Yes?
Lainey said they weren't very active on the ark. Birds could fly too far and animals couldn't run to use energy.
That's correct. They can't. That's right. So it'd make more sense they were in a state of, in a sedentary state for a year and 10 days, 370 days. But yet, again, I think that since we know that bears do hibernate, God could have made many of those creatures go into hibernation, if not all of them. Not many need, but he did say bring food. But I don't think he did all of them, because he did say in Genesis chapter 6 and verse 22, and verse 21 and 22, and take thou unto thee all food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be food for you and for them. And Noah did according to all, which means that some animals were awake and they did eat on the ark, which means there was defecation on the ark. Okay, I'm just telling you. It's not going to get rude and crude. I'm just telling you. There was defecation on the ark. There was urination on the ark. Why do I bring that up? Because I don't think it's coincidence that in chapter 8, when there's 150 days had gone by, in verse 24 of chapter 7, and the waters prevailed upon the earth for 150 days. Chapter 8, verse 1. And God remembered Noah and every living thing and all the cattle that was with him in the ark. And God made a wind pass over the earth, and the water assuaged. A wind. You know what that was? That was the first Febreze. God did the first air freshener through mankind. I'm not trying to be funny, but it is funny. Because God's saying, I understand the practical things of life. God's not some high-level God that says, oh, I know your practical little things in life that bother you, that irritate you. I don't care about them. Yes, he does. He cares about it. God cared about the stench of an ark, having feces. You imagine Noah have to go to the window? That's why the window was open, by the way, to shovel the feces out. It's not staying on the ark. Get out of here. He's shoveling that out, brother. Come on, man. That's getting out of there. That urination's getting out of there, right? So he is cleaning. They're constantly cleaning and feeding, constantly. Imagine those animals. They're constantly cleaning and feeding, feeding and cleaning, feeding and cleaning, cleaning and feeding, feeding and cleaning, cleaning and feeding. And they're taking out the off the window, taking the defecation out, the urination out. So God says, that must smell, doesn't it? Noah's like, sure does. I mean, Lord, it's been a long time. It's been like, over 4 months. Could you give me 5 months here? Give me a break here, please? And God goes, whoosh, the first cool breeze. Noah's like, praise the Lord. He has first air freshener. Hallelujah. Yes.
First of all, Lainey said, this is surely why using the wind to part the waters for Moses.
That's
Laney
funny.
said, where would the wind come into the ark? And Todd said,
The window.
That's funny, Laney.
Yeah, the window. Remember, the window was open at the very top. Remember the top of the, going back to Genesis in chapter 6, verse 16. A window shalt thou make to the ark, and a cubit shalt thou finish it above, and the door of the ark thou shalt set. So again, the window was 18 inches big. Not a lot of breeze, by the way. But knowing God and His supernatural power, He had the wind, I would imagine, go in there and probably swirl around. And you can do that, you know what I'm saying? The wind, we have that now in our day and age. We have a small opening of wind that could come in. And, you know, it wasn't, to your point, how to get in the ark, it wasn't but the top. That's it. There's a window 18 inches big. That's not very large. What, foot and a half? That's it. That's it. That's a small window, my brother. Yeah, that's a small window. And God brings that wind in there. It wasn't a ton, but it was a slight. I mean, I could imagine how long the wind may have lasted, how strong the wind will have swirled. It probably swirled into the ark and out, knowing how God can move in that way, right? So it wasn't just a natural, I think it was a supernatural wind in my opinion. Yes?
First of all, Laney said there were no windows to air it out except at the top. Todd said, let's remember, God could have made it so there was no bowel activity. Laney said, I thought the window was not opened until after the raven was released. And she said, right, Todd.
Well, when you go back to that point of what you're saying here, and you go back into chapter 8, verse 6, and it came to pass at the end of 40 days, Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made and sent forth a raven. So, at the end of that's what you're talking about, the window being opened. So, was it opened before when the wind came over the ark? I'm saying that I think it's not just coincidence. God has a wind pass over the ark. Therefore, you would hear that and you would feel that. You would hear the swirling of the wind. And if you're living in a place for 5 months and you're saying that God could have held back defecation for 5 months, God could do a lot of things. But but to be reasonable about the fact that when somebody's eating a lot of food and it's been 5 months and they haven't defecated, I find that, come on, that's not really natural. You know, because he did say, I didn't make up the book. God said, bring food on the ark for you and for them. So you have to just go with the natural flow. So I think that 5 months later, there's a wind going outside. Noah hears that. He very likely, I know I would have, if I heard a wind and if I smell a stench, I'm opening the window. That's what I would do. So why wouldn't he do that? So, but did it mention it? No. Did it mention he opened the window later on? Yes. Did it say it was the first time he opened it? No, it doesn't say that. It just made mention of opening it up with the raven. It didn't mention it earlier on. But if he did, by the way, open it up at that point, it wouldn't have mattered because, again, the rains had stopped. The rains had stopped. There was no need. There was no more rain. It was gone. It was gone. It was gone. So it was closed up to that point. Yes?
You could say that the food was necessary for after the flood because it's going to take a while for things to grow and food to be available.
That's true too. That's true too. But you have a dove showing vegetation when he came back to the ark on the cleft of which we'll get in a minute. Yes, babe.
First of all, Laney said the food they ate wasn't GMO for sure.
Yeah.
And Vicky said, can you explain Genesis 7:20? 15 cubits equals 22 feet. The earth was flat at that time, right? When did the paradise flat earth become mountainous with valleys? Did God change the top?
That's when he changed the topography. Yep, he did that.
To drain the waters by creating
Right over here.
mountains and valleys.
So-
What is the 15 cubits about?
So the 15 cubits was how high the mountains were prior to the flood. The earth had the highest mountain. It was only 15 cubits, which is actually 22 and a half feet, to your point, Genesis 7:20. Then you go to Psalm chapter 90. And in Psalm 90, a prayer of Moses, the man of God, God wrote Genesis through him, and that has been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were birthed, which means brought forth, which means they weren't there before, or ever thou had been formed, the earth and the world, for everlasting, everlasting you are God. The mountains were birthed. Then in chapter 104, verses 5 through 8, he tells you, God who laid the foundations of the earth, that they should not be moved, tottered, forever, that thou coverest it with the deep abyss with the garment. The water stood above the mountains. Verse 6 of Psalm 104. Psalm 104, verse 7 and 8 tells you what happens in meteorology. Well, you cannot hold that much water in the clouds. It just holds so much and releases it. So you just can't say the clouds soaked up the water. No, no, no. God had to do something with it. So he tells you in verse 7 and 8, and at thy rebuke, the waters fled. That's what he's talking about. At thy rebuke, they fled, they's the waters. At the voice of thy thunder and thy hastened away, thou goest up by the mountains, and they go down by the valleys, until the place thou hast founded for them. And that's where the waters went, and that's where the mountains were birthed. God went like that. So therefore, the earth was a flatter landscape, obviously, and then all of a sudden it became what it is today when God did this number. So if I had a rubber band and I went like that, it would look more oval shaped, wouldn't it? If I had a rubber band holding out like this and went like that and rose and sunk, rose mountains and sunk valleys, it looks oval, doesn't it? Yeah, like our earth today. That's what God did. He rose the mountains and sunk the valleys. And that's where the waters went, we call seas today. And then, 600 years later, he divides the earth. And the continental plates, they start moving. You say, how do I know that? Well, I'll show you how I know that. But that's in Genesis chapter 11 later on. So I hope that answers your question. Answer your question, Sister Vicky? Well, it's actually chapter 10 of Genesis. You good? You good with the answer on the question?
But it just seems funny that the great flood was 22 foot. Yes.
But you got to imagine the earth is also very huge too. It's very huge. It's very huge. It doesn't mean, by the way, it doesn't mean, just a minute, it doesn't mean the flood waters were 22 and a half feet. It just means that's the highest of the landmass.
And she said true.
Right? The floodwaters were larger than that. And how do I know that? Because you have to figure the buoyancy of this many tonnage of weight. You can't have 20 tons over 22 and a half feet of water. There's no way. So if you can Google and Siri that for, I don't know, let's see. You say, hey Siri, how deep does water have to be to have a weight of 21,000 tons? Okay, it doesn't tell you. He's pretty ignorant. So you got to figure that out. I didn't figure that part out. But I can tell you that there's no way it's 22 and a half feet. The flood was more than that. He's just pointing out that it only had to be that much to cover the mountains. Great question and great point you're making, because it's the same problem people have with Genesis chapter 8 when they go, well, the ark rested over Ararat. That's where it landed. No, dude. How could it land? There was still water. To your point you just said, Vicki, that doesn't make any sense. It can't be 150 days and all of a sudden now they just land on a mountaintop and sit there for another 150 days? Are there still water everywhere? And you're telling me a raven didn't see that? Come on. You have to be a pretty significant chunk of land to stop an ark that size with again, that much weight on it. Okay, you ain't going to have a little tiny rock stop it. That's a lot of tonnage. You can't just have a little tiny tip of a rock go, oh, I'm going to stop you. No. So in Genesis chapter 10, verse 25, unto Heber, were born two sons. The name of one was Peleg, for in his days the earth was divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. Well, when you go over to Shem's line in chapter 11, Sister Nancy before said, wait a minute, how do you get 1,000 years difference when we started off with, in Genesis, I mentioned how there was a difference of, that we said Adam was born and he was in the 5000 BC era. And then Nancy said, well, wait a minute, what about 4000 BC? And I said, the lineage of Genesis 11 will dictate the difference as to why that is. And you said, you serious? 1,000 years? Well, here you go, watch. So the numbers are, I wrote it down. So the King James numbers will add up in Genesis 11. I'm not going to go through this whole genealogy thing again, but the whole thing is, if you remember, to remind you, we did this before. In the King James Version, it lists a difference of years of 292, but in the Septuagint, I don't want to write it like that. It looks, in the Septuagint, it's 1,072, which is a difference of 780 years. So there's a 780-year difference from the King James interpretation, to your point earlier you asked me, and Genesis 11 of the genealogy versus what the Septuagint says. You said, well, why does Septuagint matter all of a sudden? Because historians that are later dated looking at the Hebraic manuscripts use the dates and numbers of the Septuagint for genealogy. They referenced it, Josephus being namely one of them. So he has distinctly, consistently used the Septuagint to do his dating. And him being a renowned historian earlier to the time frame and being Jewish, that they would say that he was, among others, that did the same thing, is highly regarded as that's valid. So he did not go with the King James version that uses the different older manuscript. He went with the earlier manuscript, although it was translated from Hebrew to Greek to English. He used that as his numbers to calculate. So therefore, the 780-year difference there is, again, a valid point to his own calculation. All right? So I digress. But using some of that understanding, you will find that the days of Peleg, I wrote on the board here, the days of Peleg coming from the flood, using the numbers of Genesis 11 and the Septuagint, you'll find that his days were between 2694 BC and 2355 BC. That's the time of his life, given his years of life, 339 years of age. Therefore, I contend that since the flood happened in the 600 years of Noah, it could be 600 years later from the flood, which would be 2644, that God then divided the earth, which I find to be coincidental, if it was true, because it would mean Peleg was 50 years old. And since his name means the earth divided, and at 50 would be the precursor of a symbolic year of Jubilee, things being set free, being loosed. How coincidental is it that it also matches up to 600 years after the flood? What a coincidence. I don't think so. So I think, personally, that the earth continental plates divided in 2644 BC. That's what I think. Now, and again, I base it on that reasoning. Do I know that for certain? No. Is that a conjecture based on fact? Yes. So that's my belief, and it's based upon, one, the numbers of just doing the math. Two, based on the fact that 600 years seems to be symmetrical to the 600 years of Noah's life, to 600 years later, that now aligns with the 50th year of Peleg's life, which aligns with the year of Jubilee. And in both cases, 100 times 6 is the 100 God's fruit-bearing number he expects for maturity, and 6, the inheritance of man. And yet, in both cases, that he ended mankind, except for Noah and his family, and here he divided mankind. So I think it's just interesting, and the year of Jubilee, again, means all debts are loosed. It means to be loosed, right? So he loosed the continental plates. So the plates shifted at that point, which would be interesting, which is why people say, well, how does that align with Egypt and pyramids, people always say, that are in South America from the Inca tribe, and they align with Africa. And if you see the continental plates of Africa and South America, they kind of fit together. And they say, hey, wait a minute, is that where the continental plates shifted after they built the pyramids? Well, if you hold to this theory, that would be true. Because King Menes was in 3100 BC. 3100 BC. And then you have Job, who would have built the pyramid himself. He would have built it, right? He would have built it after this. Job would have built the Great Pyramid after this, but they would have had pyramids there before that, since he was the first actual. There was a good 500 years there almost between here and there. Where Job, he was in, like, the time frame for him was around 2560 to 2540 BC. So it gives you some scale of knowing where Job is at. So this is King Menes. This is the Pharaoh. He's the first known world ruler. And then you have Job, who's right here.
Job would have been going through this while the earth was divided.
So Job, yes, that means Job would have been on the earth. He would have been on the earth after the earth, or he was born after the earth was divided. It was divided at 2644. He was after that. So there.
You said 25, 6, oh wait, yeah, okay, 25.
Yeah, because you got to go down. Yeah. So he would have been on the earth. So Job's already doing his thing after the earth was divided. So he didn't come on the scene until after the earth was divided. So it's interesting how, in Peleg's day, this holds to be true. Now, again, there's a lot of just uncertainty because of the fact that we don't know the exact day, I'm guessing. But the line of, we just know one thing for certain. It happened in Peleg's day. I got to this date just doing the math of taking Ha-Adam, when he died in 4070 BC, and just going that way. And by the way, if you start doing the math, you'll start to see how it all has to make sense that way to lead to Joseph, to lead to so. And by the way, in Joseph's age, which you do the math, I could do another session on this, but to do the math to continue on, and I have to change your chart, by the way. But you'll find that Joseph was, again, 1800, and he died in 1690, which coincidentally, within that period, last time I checked my math, the dates of 1765 and 1760 are within that range, are they not? Watch this coincidence. From 1765 to 1760, an interesting thing happens in Egyptian history. They have a pharaoh named Khenjer, Khendjer. He's the first, wait for it, non-royal lineage of a king, and the first, wait for it, Semitic pharaoh. Oh, excuse me? Excuse me? Could that have been what they called Joseph? I don't know. I just know it's interesting to me. It's not just coincidence to me that during the time of Joseph's life, there was an Egyptian historical fact of a pharaoh that had no royal line and is the first Semitic pharaoh. I don't find that to be coincidence. I'm just saying that's kind of interesting to me. Interesting to me. But he wasn't a pharaoh, we know that. Joseph was not a pharaoh. But he was, in fact, again, the Hyksos came in also in the 1700s, which again is right prior to Joseph's death. They came in before that, 1775, they came in and did some havoc unto, 1728, havoc unto Egypt. So,
Ricky said, spell his name, please.
It's Khen, D as in David, J-E-R, Khenjer. He was the first Semitic pharaoh, and he came before the Hyksos came in 1728 and kind of ransacked the place. But the Hyksos were a Semitic tribe from Shem's line, but they did actually have other interactions as early as 1775. So the Hyksos, Khenjer came from the Hyksos people who dominated Egypt, won the battle, and then took the throne. That's where Khenjer came from. But I think it's just not coincidental that after that, there was a Semitic-friendly pharaoh that would then take Joseph in. That would make sense. Which is why it says a pharaoh that rose up and didn't know Joseph is talking about later on when the Hyksos lost some of their control over the Egyptian throne, which is what happened. So anyway, that's not coincidence, I don't think, at all. I think it's just rather food for thought that also fits into the narrative of the dates that all align coincidentally if you use 5000 BC as your beginning. If you don't, then everything's off. It's all off. You can't get to this point, which again feeds a narrative of this date to this date and so on. Feeds the flood date to Peleg's date and so on. So with that being said, we're going to get ahead of ourselves a little bit. Let's go back again and read about the flood once again and about Noah's Ark. That's what we're here to talk about, right? So in Noah's Ark, and he said, thou shalt have, in chapter 7 and in verse 20, chapter 6, verse 20, he says every creeping thing. Every creeping thing. As well as he says the same thing again in chapter 7 and in verse 14. Every creeping thing. Because people tend to always either do one of two things, and I'm included in this. We tend to think of animals with 4 legs walking on an ark. We leave out the birds. Or we'll go, oh no, I got the birds in my head. I got them. I see birds going on the ark along with animals. How about little spiders and scorpions and caterpillars and grasshoppers, mosquitoes and all that stuff, right? You're like, what? God says creepy thing, right? So love bug, ladybugs and all that stuff. They're going on the ark.
Lady said frogs.
Frogs, right? They're on the ark. So wait a second. Whoa. Think about something. I started talking this with Babes last night on the patio. I was looking out at God's creation and how he did our backyards, like all this greenery, and I'm looking in, I'm thinking, wait a second. When we go to a museum today, or museum, but what do you want to call it, but a place where they keep animals and insects, we go to they're on display, they're behind what? Plexiglass or glass? There was no glass or plexiglass on the ark. So what does that tell us? Noah had to build a wooden section of the ark and wall it up to the top and to the side and seal those puppies in, which means they had to be, you can see why God says, pitch it from within, because guess what critters do? They get through cracks, don't they? Okay? So he had to pitch in a whole area and just, how'd that, and by the way, they can't be roaming around the ark. Little spiders and scorpions and all that can't roam around the ark. You'd step on them by accident, right? You have to go in a separate room. So they're in a separate room. They have to be closed in too, because you can't have them go through cracks and get out. You have to have them all closed in. So they were closed in a room, and imagine that room must have been like a creepy horror show of these little creepy things that's creeping around. There's this pretty, yes.
See, Lainey said frogs. I guess I read that. Vicky said roaches.
Yeah.
Todd, how does Noah gather them? And Lainey said fleas and lice. And Egypt was afflicted with some of these critters. Vicky said, I often wonder why those creatures are necessary.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And then to your point, Brother Todd, and God's the one who brought the animals to the ark. It was not Noah that did that. And that's the reason how you know that's what happened. So the first thing you see here, the Lord said unto Noah in chapter 7, verse 1, come thou and all your house into the ark, for you have I seen righteous before me in this generation. So again, in this generation, Noah's generation was 950 years. Hello? Does that count his father and grandfather? They were alive. Methuselah just died the year before the flood. Dude, that's freaky. His grandfather just died. And now he goes on the ark. He's like, oh, that sucks. I mean, just imagine if you're living that long. I mean, if you're Methuselah, you're like, I'm right there at the finish line. I'm right there. I'm right there. Just give me one more year. Let me die in the ark. No, die before the ark. And Noah's going.
His name, his death brings. He knew
Yeah.
he wasn't going to get to go.
Well, that's true too. And then Lamech, his dad, died way before that, many years before that. So it's just like, I mean, I just can imagine Noah just being heartbroken, you know? Yes.
Vicky had said, I often wonder why those creatures are necessary. Tracy said, circle of life, Vicky, food for others. Lainey said, to help the pestilence come about when it is prophesied.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I want to one day ask God about that kind of stuff and ask him what are the reasons for the palmetto bugs and roaches and roly-polies and all these little mosquitoes and all these little bad little things that love bugs that can't, yeah. So all these little things that just, but on this situation, and we're bringing out, so I'm saying to you, they couldn't have run freely because one, you would have stepped on them by accident, whether you wanted to or not. Two, you're tempting the animals who are hungry to eat them. That ain't cool, right? So you got to have them be in a secured place just by common sense. And so they're probably in a walled place. So I'm curious, Todd and Pam, when you guys go see the ark, if they're going to show that, a walled-in area for insects, because you have to have it. You can't have an open space. There has to be some walled-off area somewhere for the insects, or the creepy things. So in chapter 7, verse 2, again, every clean beast to take by the sevens, and male and female, and of beasts that are not clean by 2, male and female, of the flowers also of the heirs, chapter 7, verse 3, of 7 by 7 by the male and female, to keep the seed alive upon the face of the earth. And yet for 7 days I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And every living substance, for I have made, I will destroy it from off the face of the earth. And Noah did according to all the Lord commanded him. And Noah was a son of 600 years old when the flood of the waters was upon the earth. And it says later on, Noah went in, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives, and with him in the ark. And because of the waters of the flood, the clean beasts, of the beasts that are not clean, of the flyers, and of everything that creepeth upon the earth, that went in two and two unto Noah into the ark, male and female, as God Elohim had commanded Noah. And it came to pass after 7 days, the waters of the flood were upon the earth, and the 600th year of Noah's life, and the 2nd month, 17th day of the month. And the same day all the fountains of the deep broke up, and the windows of the heavens were opened, and the rain was upon the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. And the self same day, entered Noah, Shem, and Ham, and Japheth, the sons of Noah, Noah's wife, and 3 wives, and the sons with them into the ark, and every living being, after its kind, all the cattle after their kind, and creepy thing, and every creepy thing on the earth after its kind, and every fowl after its kind, and every bird of every sort. And they went into the ark unto Noah, and two and two of all flesh, wherein is the breath of life. And again, they went in male and female, and God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in. The Lord closed the door. It's pretty awesome. Yes?
Tracy said fleas were on the animals. Laney said free ride.
Yeah.
Tracy said lice and ticks, too.
You guys are funny.
And a person named Noel, N-U-L-L, has joined.
Yep. Okay. Well, hello, Noel. So as we're looking at the context of this process of Noah's Ark, you got to look at now. We just talked about how the animals got on there. God brought them there. We talked about how the aspect of the birds and now the creepy things. But Noah wants you to also see this. Interesting enough, there's a little math problem here. It says in verse 6 of chapter 7, Noah was a son of 600 years old when the flood waters were upon the earth. I didn't write the book, right? But earlier, again, I'm reading the page torn from my Bible because it fell out. I'm not reading a magazine that says the scripture. It just fell out. And so in chapter 5, verse 32, Noah was a son of 500 years old when his wife had triplets, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, right? So wait a second. Wait a second. First of all, there were 7 days on the ark before the flood happened. But the scripture says, read the careful note, it didn't say he was 600 years old when he boarded the ark. It says he was 600 years old when the flood waters were upon the earth. Interesting. Which made me kind of go, Why? Because of Genesis chapter 11. Because chapter 11 has an interesting faux pas that's hard to understand until you understand that scripture right there. Genesis chapter 11, go fast forward about Shem. Chapter 11, verse 11. And it says, verse 10, excuse me. And these are the generations of Shem. Shem was 100 years old when he begat Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. That can't be possible. If Shem was born when Noah was 500, and Noah was 600, that means Shem is how old? 100. So if Shem's 100, and he began Arphaxad 2 years after the flood, then he'd be 102, not 100. So what do you mean by, right? What is that supposed to mean? Right? How does the math work out? It doesn't, unless they all went on the ark and had a birthday, and that during that 7-day period. And I contend that's what happened. I contend that's why God put this scripture there, to let us know the birth date of Noah and his sons. I believe Noah's birth date was in the same week after his sons were born. I believe his sons were born right prior to his birth date, and he was right thereafter. So as soon as they were 0 years old, he was then another year older. So he was 501 when they were still 0. And when he turned 502, they just turned 1. And therefore, when he was on the ark, he went on the ark at 599 years of age. They had a birthday. They were 99 years of age. Then they turned 100, and then the flood came. So he was 600 years old. They were 100 years old, but they just had turned that age when they got on the ark. Excuse me, when they were waiting on the ark, I should say, before the flood to come. You say, well, why do I have to say that? Because if I go, and I'm going to just simple math here. Since we know that ER is April, May, please follow the bouncing ball here so you can understand what I'm saying here. The flood happened on the second month, on the 17th day of April, May. Understand how the Jewish people keep a calendar. ER, their second month, is our April, May. So when does ER actually begin? It's our April 15th, our tax day, is their actual first day of ER. That's ER1. So if you do the math on that, and you count the 17th day of ER, so 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, right? That's 10. 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. That's 15. 30 is 16. You count one more day, and that's May 1st. So what I'm saying to you is, May 1st was the flood on our calendar. So I'll put it up on top of the board, actually. I'll put it up here so you can know. So the flood was on May 1st.
It's interesting right now,
Yeah, well, I know, it's crazy. So the flood was May 1st, not my math. That's not my, there's no conjecture there, that's just facts. So the flood was May 1st. So why is that important? I submit to you that because of Genesis chapter 11, verse 10 and 11, and comparison to Genesis chapter 7, verse 6, we know that God is not a liar, but man is. And we know that God's never wrong, but man is always wrong. And we know that God writes things for a reason. Nothing's like a throw-in, like, oh, you know, no. Everything's a reason. So why would God say that Shem was 100 years old and he got Arphaxad 2 years after the flood? And I'll tell you why. Because remember, what the Jewish New Year is in Nisan. The Jewish New Year in Nisan starts on, because Nisan is March, April, which means the Jewish New Year would be our March 15th. You with me? That's the first month of the Jewish calendar, which is March, April, which would definitely be March 15th. That's the beginning of the new year. That's a new year. Well, if you're on March 15th and the flood happens on May 1st and your birthday is in April, well, now you're on the ark from May through next May. Hello? That means that now you go from, you turn another age, right? Yes.
Tracy said, this makes me sad that God wiped out humanity on my birthday.
Sorry. I'm sorry. So, but 2 years after the flood is speaking to the fact that he was 100 years old. So Noah turned 600 in April. So I think in April, so if you count 7 days before, you count backwards, that's 30, 29, 28, 27, 26, 25, 24. So somewhere between April 24th and April 30th was Noah's birthday and his 3 sons. And why is that important? Because that means they were on the ark. When they were on the ark, they were 599 and 99 respectfully. And then when they waited for the 7 days, their birthday happened, and now they're respectfully 100 and 600, and the flood came. And now, so they're on the ark, and they go through this period of time. And when they come off the ark in the second year, so the second year of actually, they're in the first year already. This is the first year. This is the first year of the ark. They come back to their birthday the next year. They come back to their birthday, and they're still 100. And I'm saying that Arphaxad was actually, the second year speaks of the second year of the calendar year. So the first calendar year, the flood happened. They come. That's the first year, and the second year it says after in the scripture, but it's an interpreted word that could mean after or in the year, in the second year. So it could mean after 2 years, or it could mean in 2 years. In this case, it means in 2 years, because the 1 year started from May to May as 1 year, and they were on the ark. They were 99 years old. They turned 100 in April, and they turned 100. Is that right? Yeah. They were 99 on the ark. They turned 100 before the flood happened. And so then on the following May, Noah was 601, and they were 101. Did I do that correctly? Is that right? Yes. Is that right? No. I know what I did wrong. One more thing I forgot to tell you. One more thing. So here's what I did. I forgot. And his 3 sons. If his birthday was after theirs, if his birthday was 1 day after theirs, so say his birthday, let's just say his birthday was April 24th, but then theirs was the 27th, then that means he would be, obviously, when they were originally born, he was 500 years old and then they were born, right? So, is that right? Is that correctly? Yes. So 500. So he turned 5 years old, and then they were born. So they were born just days. They could have been born days after his birth. What I'm pointing out here. So if that's the case, he turns. He was. So they turn. He was actually again 500. Is that correctly? Not his birthday. Yeah, his birthday. Yeah. Not them. I'm saying this backwards. By the way, I did this for an hour and a half on the patio last night with Babes. That's why I'm getting this confused in my head right now. All right. So I'm saying his birthday was later. So if Noah's birthday was right after that, so if he was 500 here, and then his birthday was the 27th, now he's 501 when they were first born. But they're still 0, which means he's always a year ahead of them. Which means if he's 599, then they were 98, because he's 1 year ahead of them. You with me? So because his 3 sons are here. So if that's the case, that's why I got this. I almost had this messed up for a second there. So he's on the ark at 599. He then turns 600. They're 98. They don't turn because they're a year apart. So they turned. So if he was 98, that means they were 99 here. If I did that correctly, is that right? How am I doing this wrong? So this whole day in the patio today. So if he's 500 here, then he turns 501. There's 0. He's 1 year difference than them because they were born before him. So if they're 90, they were born before him. So if they're 98, he would have just turned 599. They would have just turned 98. That's right. That's right. That's right. Correct? Is that right? If they're 1 year apart. So if he was born the day after if his birthday was the day after their birthday, his wife would have given birth to them on the last, say, day of his 500 years of life, which counts as him being 500. 2 years later, he's 501, but they're still 0, which means there's always a year difference, right? Am I right about that? Right? And then so when they're 98, he would then 2 days later be 99, or in this case 599 and they're 98. So then the following year they're 99. When there's a 1 year after the flood is 99, and then they turn 100, and it says 100 years old 2 years after the flood, and that's how you get the Genesis 11 issue of why it says 2 years after the flood Shem had Arphaxad. Does that make sense? Did I do that right? Did I do it right? So what I'm saying is if Noah's birthday, I'll put it over here differently. So in order for them to have a birthday on the ark, I'm saying that Noah's birthday, Noah's B-Day was right after, say a day after, let's say it was a day after, or say 3 days. Let's say 3. So it was 3 days after Son's B-Day. Which means he can get on the ark. He can get on the ark at 500. He's 599 on the 24th, and they're going to be 98 years old. No, excuse me. He'd be 599. They'd be 99. Correct? That's what it would be. No, not 98. 99. I knew I had it wrong. See, ignoramus. So it's 99, and then he turns 600, and that's how he's a year difference than them. That's the answer. I think I had something wrong. Thanks for, I had to think this out. So they were 1 year different than him. So if he's 600 on the ark, then they're 99. There's only 1 year difference, not 2. 1 year difference. I had to keep thinking this through. Apologize. But the point being that the next year they turned 100. The next April they turned 100. And now they are actually 1 year on the ark 3 months later. April, 1 month later, in May. And then it says 2 years after the flood, because you had the 1 year from Nisan through Nisan, that's 1 year. They're in the second year now, and then he has Arphaxad. And that's when he's 100 years old. And that's how that works. And by the way, if you're thinking Arphaxad was born, wait a minute, is there enough time for a 9 month gestation? So if they get off the ark in May, if he gets off the ark, they get off the ark later on in May, and she gets pregnant, say, in July, is there enough time to have a child within that 100 years before his next birthday in April? Well, sure there is, because you have July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March, right before April. Before he turns 101, she gave birth to Arphaxad. and they were 2 years after the flood. You see what I'm saying? And that's how you see that. That's how that makes sense. So she got pregnant right there after they got off the ark, about 2 months afterwards, probably, I would say. And that's kind of explaining it. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because they underwent a change on the ark. They had a birth date on the ark, a change. They turned 99, and Noah turned 600, and they turned 100, and he turned 600. They both went on the ark. They went on the ark at, I said this wrong. They went on the ark at 599. He turned 600, and they, is that right? Yeah, he turned 600 on the ark. They were still 99 because his birthday was right after. Because his birthday was after their birthday. So he turned 600. They just turned 99, and then he just turned 600. Yes?
And Todd had a question, but he's okay now.
Yeah, I had to fix it. My math was a little off. So they were 99 on, say, the 24th, and then Noah was 599, but then 2 days later he turned 600. So there's this 1 year difference because they were born in his 500th year of life. So if you go a year later, then the following April they're 100, and then again if they're off the ark on May, then 2 months goes by because 2 is the number for witness and testimony. I would go with fall of May, so say July she conceives. That gives 9 months of gestation. That means you got July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March. That means he'd be born before Shem turns 101. So you see, that's how it's in the second year. Because they definitely went to 2 years, which means that Shem had a birthday on the ark just as well as Noah did. They went on the ark, they were 98, Noah was 599. They turned 99, Noah turned 600. So why is there an important issue there to know they both had a birthday waiting these 7 days? Why? I'll tell you why I went through all that. You're really going, what's the big deal about all that? You'll be wasting my time. The reason why I went through all that is because 7 days is not a coincidence, and then the ark is a time of trouble and a deliverance through this time of trouble. And there's 4 groups of people here because you got to see them all as one flesh. Noah and his wife, his 3 sons and their wives. And the difference is why there's 7 days is because they each represent the only groups of people that come out of tribulation. Because that's what this whole is about. This whole thing's about that. Enoch was a type way beforehand as a rapture that's gone. People are taken out. But you have in Noah the Sun Medicoi, 144,000 Sun Medicoi people, the ones that they can't be killed, the ones in Revelation 14 that are not Jewish, people in Christ that have a higher level of understanding and they go out and preach the word. They can't be killed. And then you have Shem represents the Jewish people that are procured in Petra. You have Japheth that represents the remnant who survive as just regular Joes who survive. They're not Jewish, but they survived without being beheaded just yet. They were going to be, but God cut the day short and come back and delivered them. There's about 1 million plus of those. And then there's the Hams. And Ham was cursed, Noah said, and they represent the other folks that came through tribulation at the end. What happened to them? They're the ones who were at Gog and Magog. Not cool. They're the ones who took the mark of the beast and worshiped him. Just like what Ham did. Ham had an unholy union, just like what they did in tribulation, or will do, when they align themselves to worship their God as the Antichrist, who's Satan, the beast. That's insane. So the unholy union of worshiping the beast as God, as the opponent in the last half of tribulation, aligns itself with Ham, had unholy union with his mother, which is disgusting. And that's the reason why he is cursed, just like they're cursed. And the fire, torment, smoke up forever and ever. So those 4 groups of people they all went through a change, didn't they? Did they all go in the same? When they went in tribulation, were they the same after they came out? No, they weren't. Before the tribulation started, they all had a change. The Sun Medicoi were not always Sun Medicoi. They became Sun Medicoi. The 144,000 weren't procured beforehand. They're procured when they get pursued. The people that live to the end, they don't know who they are. They're just the attrition of who's left. And the same with those people who took the mark of the beast and worship him. It's who's alive who does that in the second half of tribulation. So they all don't exist. They exist, but they're not known prior to. They all went through a change in tribulation to become these people. And that's why I believe their birth date was noted here, only able to be seen when you compare it to Genesis chapter 11, verse 10 and 11. The only way you're going to see and know that they went on the ark and waited 7 days and had a birthday is to do the math between Genesis 10, 11, 10, 11, compared to Genesis 7:6. That's the only way to figure that out. There's no other explanation for it, add the math to add up. And then when you say, well, why did God do that? And you say, well, a birthday is a change in your life is changing, right? Something that you've changed. And so you have a year older, right? So you have a birthing reference there. And all four of those people went through a different. They all came into existence during tribulation. How coincidental is that? So I think it's just something that I thought was just amazing to me to see that and how God would do that. I never knew they had a birthday during that 7-year waiting period, which represents the 7-year tribulation, from which then Noah goes through and his sons and their wives through the whole thing for a year and 10 days. Yes?
And he said, why would Ham be protected from the pitch inside and out and then not have any more than the mark, etc.? Need more understanding of this regarding Ham.
Ham was he wasn't cursed until after the tribulation period. He was protected because in the tribulation period, he aligned himself with Satan as his God. Therefore, he didn't die. He was protected because he took the mark of the beast and worshipped him.
She said, okay.
In type. So in type, he's a picture. And so on the ark, he aligned himself with Noah. I'm one of your sons. But after the ark, he showed his real colors, didn't he? He showed himself to be accursed. When Jesus comes back, he thinks he's safe because he aligns himself with what he thinks is the true God. To find out later on, not true. Which means that Ham's heart on the ark was already corrupt. Which is no shock. We already knew that because God tells you that in Genesis chapter 6. But it really makes it more palatable to know it wasn't just like Shem and Japheth's heart. He was much more corrupt on the ark. So that means that he probably wasn't getting along too well with his brother.